The crack of thunder shook the earth as Bethany Thomas ran through the downpour, her once fine dress now torn and mudded, her face marked with the fresh bruises of her husband's rage. Arizona Territory, 1878, was no place for a woman alone, but death seemed preferable to another night under Victor Thomas's roof. Her lungs burned as she stumbled toward the outskirts of Silveridge, clutching her small bundle of possessions, each step taking her further from the grand house that had become her prison. Blood trickled from her split lip, mingling with the rain as she pushed herself forward. 3 years of marriage had taught her that Victor's promises of love had been as empty as the liquor bottles he left scattered around their home. Tonight's beating had been worse than ever the whiskey on his breath, his accusations of unfaithfulness, and the gleam in his eye that told her he might not stop until she lay still. "You're nothing without me," he had snarled as his ring caught her cheekbone. "Where would you go?" "Who would take in damaged goods like you?" Bethany had waited until he passed out before gathering what little she could carry. 22 years old, and her life had come to this fleeing into a storm with no destination but away. The lights of Silveridge faded behind her as she made for the stand of cottonwoods near the creek. She knew there was an abandoned trapper's cabin somewhere in those trees, a place she'd discovered during one of her rare, unaccompanied walks. If she could reach it before Victor woke, she might have time to think to plan her next move. Her ankle twisted on a hidden rock, sending her sprawling into the mud. For a moment she lay there, the rain pelting her back, sobs racking her body. "Get up," she whispered to herself. "Get up or die here." Pulling herself to her feet, she limped the remaining distance to the trees, finding the dilapidated cabin just as lightning split the sky. Bethany pushed open the door, which hung precariously on one hinge, and collapsed onto the dirt floor. The cabin offered little protection from the elements. The roof leaked in several places, and the wind howled through gaps in the walls. Still, it was shelter enough for the night. She huddled in a corner, wrapping her shawl tightly around her shoulders, and listened to the storm rage outside, matching the tempest in her heart. Morning broke clear and bright, the storm having washed the world clean. Bethany's body, however, felt anything but renewed. Every movement brought fresh pain from the bruises that had blossomed overnight, dark purple against her fair skin. She forced herself to her feet, wincing, and moved to the single small window to survey her surroundings. The cabin sat in a small clearing, with the creek bubbling nearby. In the distance, she could see rolling hills and beyond them mountains. Which direction should she go? Victor would search for her not out of love but pride. He wouldn't allow his property to escape without consequence. A noise outside froze her in place. Hoofbeats, someone approaching. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she scrambled back from the window, looking frantically for somewhere to hide. The cabin offered nothing but a small alcove where firewood had once been stacked. She wedged herself into it just as the hoofbeats stopped outside. Heavy boots thudded on the wooden steps. The door creaked open wider. "Hello," a deep voice called. Not Victor's voice, but that meant little. He had friends, men who owed him favors. Bethany held her breath, pressing herself further into the alcove. "I know someone's in here," the voice said. Saw the tracks leading from town, mighty small tracks for a man. She remained silent, hoping whoever it was would leave. "I don't mean any harm," the voice continued. "Just checking to make sure nobody's hurt after that storm." The footsteps moved further into the cabin, and suddenly a tall figure appeared in her limited line of vision. A man, broad-shouldered and lean, dressed in dusty riding clothes. A cowboy, by the look of him, with a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his features. When he turned toward her hiding place, Bethany couldn't suppress a gasp. His eyes found her immediately eyes the color of the sky after a storm. "Madam," he said softly, as if speaking to a frightened animal, "you're safe now," but she'd heard such promises before. She pressed herself further into the corner, ignoring the splinters that dug into her back. "Please leave," she whispered. Instead, he crouched down, keeping a respectful distance. That's when she noticed he had a canteen and a small bundle in his hands. "Brought some water and food," he said, setting them on the floor between them. "Thought whoever was out here might need it." He straightened and stepped back, giving her space. In the light streaming through the door, she could see him clearly now. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that curled at the nape of his neck and a face weathered by sun and wind. His expression held neither pity nor judgment, just a steady calm that somehow made her racing heart slow. "My name's Yates." "Yates Donovan. I work at the Broken Spoke Ranch about 5 miles west of here." Bethany remained silent. "You're Mrs. Thomas, aren't you?" he asked quietly, fear flooded through her anew. "How do you know that? Saw you in town once or twice, with your husband." His voice changed slightly on the last word, hardening. "Mrs. Thomas, did he send you?" she interrupted, panic rising again. "No, madam, I wouldn't do Victor Thomas's bidding if he paid me in gold." Yates's face darkened. "I know what kind of man he is." "Then you know why I can't go back," she said, finding a small measure of courage. "I do." He nodded, then added with quiet certainty, "He'll never touch you again." Something in his voice, a solemn promise rather than a threat, made her truly look at him. His hands were calloused but steady, his stance open and unthreatening. "How can you be sure of that?" Bethany asked, her voice barely audible. "Because I won't let him," Yates replied simply. "Neither will my boss. Mr. Callahan doesn't hold with men who beat women." She emerged slightly from her hiding place, wincing as her bruised body protested. "You don't understand. Victor has influence. He owns half the businesses in Silveridge. Silveridge isn't the only town in Arizona territory." He offered his hand but didn't insist when she didn't take it. "Mrs. Thomas, Bethany," she corrected, suddenly unable to bear hearing her married name. "Bethany," he repeated, and something in the way he said it made her name sound like it belonged to someone valuable. "You need medical attention and a safer place than this. I can take you to the ranch. The cook's wife, Martha, has healing skills. She can tend to your injuries. And when Victor comes looking, let us worry about that." The certainty in his voice was oddly comforting. "Will you come? I promise no harm will come to you at the Broken Spoke." Bethany hesitated, weighing her options. She had nowhere else to go, no money, no friends who wouldn't turn her away out of fear of her husband. And her body ached terribly, she knew, without seeing that her back was a mass of bruises from being thrown against the wall. "I have a gentle horse," Yates added. "She'll carry you easy." Finally, she nodded. "All right." He smiled then, a small, warm gesture that transformed his serious face. "Good. Can you walk?" "Yes," she said, though she wasn't entirely sure. She took a tentative step forward, then another, before her injured ankle betrayed her. She stumbled and Yates moved quickly to catch her, his hands strong but gentle on her arms. "I've got you," he murmured. The contact made her flinch instinctively, and he immediately loosened his grip, though he didn't let her fall. "I'm sorry," she whispered, ashamed of her reaction. "Don't be," he replied, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't identify. "You have nothing to apologize for." With his support, she made her way out of the cabin into the brilliant morning sunlight. A dappled mare stood patiently nearby, her reins looped around a branch. "This is Willow," Yates said, "gentlest horse in the territory." Getting Bethany onto the horse proved a challenge. Her ribs screamed in protest when she tried to lift her foot to the stirrup, and after a few futile attempts, Yates cleared his throat. "Madam Bethany, would you allow me to lift you up? I promise to be careful." She hesitated, then nodded. His hands were respectful as he boosted her into the saddle, and he immediately stepped away once she was seated. Taking Willow's reins, he began to lead the horse westward, walking beside rather than riding behind her. "It's about an hour's walk," he explained. "The trail's easy enough." They traveled in silence for a time, the only sounds the creek burbling alongside the path and the soft clopping of Willow's hooves on the packed earth. Bethany found herself studying Yates's profile as he walked ahead. There was a steadiness to him, a quiet strength that had nothing to do with the muscles evident beneath his simple shirt. "How did you find me?" she finally asked. He glanced back. "I was checking the south pasture fences after the storm, saw fresh tracks heading to that old cabin. Most folks around here know it's abandoned, so I was curious." He paused. "I'm glad I followed them." "As am I," she admitted softly. "Has it been? Has it always been bad?" he asked carefully. Bethany stared at the gentle sway of Willow's mane. "No, not at first. He was charming when we met. My father had just died, leaving debts I couldn't pay. Victor seemed like salvation." She laughed bitterly. He didn't show his true nature until after the wedding. That's often the way, Yates murmured. My ma, she had a similar experience. This new information made her look at him with fresh eyes. Is she? She died when I was 15, he said. Pneumonia took her, not my father's fists, though they didn't help her constitution any. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. He was quiet for a moment. That's why I noticed your situation. Recognized the signs. They rounded a bend in the trail, and suddenly the valley opened up before them. Nestled in its center was a sprawling ranch the Broken spoke. Several buildings clustered around a main house with corrals and barns spread out behind. Men on horseback moved in the distance, herding cattle. Home, Yates said, a note of pride in his voice. As they approached, a woman emerged from what appeared to be a cookhouse, wiping her hands on her apron. She spotted them and raised a hand in greeting, then froze when she got a better look at Bethany. Martha, Yates called, we need your help. The woman, stout, gray-haired, with kind eyes, hurried forward. Land's sakes, child, what happened to you? Then understanding dawned on her face. Oh. Oh, my dear. This is Mrs. Thomas from Silveridge, Yates explained. Bethany, this is Martha Wilkins. Her husband is the best cook in 3 counties, and she's the closest thing to a doctor we've got. Come inside, child, Martha said, helping Bethany dismount with surprising strength for her size. We'll get you fixed up. Martha led her to a small but tidy cabin behind the cookhouse. This is where Robert and I live, she explained. You'll have privacy here. The next hour was both painful and soothing as Martha gently cleaned and treated Bethany's injuries. The older woman clucked and muttered under her breath as each new bruise was revealed, but her hands remained gentle. 3 cracked ribs, I reckon, she said as she wrapped Bethany's torso with clean bandages. And that ankle's badly sprained. The cuts aren't deep, thank the Lord, but you'll be sore for weeks. When she finished, Martha helped Bethany into a clean nightgown. You rest now. I'll bring some broth later. Left alone in the small bedroom, Bethany sank into the first real bed she'd known in days. Despite her pain and fear, exhaustion claimed her almost immediately. She woke to voices outside the window, Yates, and an older man she didn't recognize. Thomas is in town, demanding his wife back, the unfamiliar voice said. Sheriff doesn't seem inclined to cross him. He can demand all he wants, Yates replied, his voice hard. She's not going back. I agree with you, boy, but we need to be smart about this. He's claiming she stole from him. That's a lie. Of course it is, but he's got influence and we need to tread carefully. Bethany's heart pounded. She should have known Victor wouldn't let her go easily. Now she'd brought trouble to the people who had helped her. The bedroom door opened and Martha entered with a tray. She smiled when she saw Bethany was awake. You've slept the day away, dear. How are you feeling? I heard them talking, Bethany said, struggling to sit up. About my husband, I should go. You'll do no such thing, Martha interrupted firmly. Mr. Callahan and Yates will handle this. Now eat something. The broth was rich and flavorful, awakening Bethany's appetite. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first spoonful touched her lips. Your husband, Martha said hesitantly as Bethany ate. Has he always been? Violent, Bethany supplied. No. But there were signs I should have heeded. Jealousy, controlling behavior. He isolated me from the few friends I had. She set down her spoon. I was young and alone when we met. He seemed so confident, so capable. By the time I realized my mistake, I was trapped. Martha nodded, understanding in her eyes. My sister was in a similar situation once. She got away, though, lives in California now with a good man who treats her right. I just want to be free of him, Bethany whispered. I don't expect anything more than that. A knock at the door interrupted them. Yates stood there, his expression grave. Mrs. Wilkins, Mr. Callahan would like a word with our guest if she's feeling up to it. Martha looked to Bethany, who nodded. I'll help you dress, the older woman said. A few minutes later, dressed in a simple borrowed dress that hung loosely on her frame, Bethany made her way to the main house with Yates's support. Her ankle still throbbed, but the wrapping Martha had applied made walking possible. Mr. Callahan is a good man, Yates assured her as they walked slowly across the yard. He'll help you. The ranch owner waited for them in a study lined with books, a tall man with silver hair and shrewd eyes. He rose when they entered, gesturing to a comfortable chair. Mrs. Thomas, he greeted her, his voice kind but authoritative. I'm Edward Callahan. Please sit. Once she was settled, he continued. Yates has explained your situation. I want you to know that you're welcome to stay at the Broken Spoke as long as needed. Thank you, Bethany said, but I heard. My husband is looking for me, Callahan nodded grimly. Claims you stole family heirlooms and money. I took nothing but my own clothing, she protested. I believe you. He leaned forward. Mrs. Thomas, I need to ask, do you wish to return to your husband? No, she said firmly, surprising herself with her conviction. I'd rather die. Then you won't, Callahan stated simply. The law is complicated in these matters. A husband has rights over his wife that I find distasteful, but that's the reality we face. However, he continued, I have some influence of my own, and I believe in doing what's right regardless of the law's imperfections. What Mr. Callahan means, Yates interjected, is that we're going to help you, law be damned. Callahan's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. Precisely, though I might have put it more delicately. He turned back to Bethany. Do you have family elsewhere? Somewhere you could go once you're healed? She shook her head. My parents are dead. I have an aunt in Boston, but we've never met. She likely wouldn't welcome me. Then we'll figure something else out. He stood. For now, rest and recover. You're safe here. As they left the study, Bethany's legs suddenly gave out. Yates caught her easily, concern etching his features. I've got you, he murmured, the same words he'd spoken at the cabin. This time, she didn't flinch from his touch. The next few days passed in a haze of sleep and healing. Martha tended to Bethany's injuries with herbal poultices and gentle care, while Robert, the cook, made it his personal mission to put some meat on those bones, as he put it. Yates visited daily, sometimes just sitting quietly while she rested, other times telling her stories about the ranch to distract her from her pain and worry. She learned that he'd been orphaned at 16 and had made his way west, finding work and eventually a home at the Broken Spoke. Mr. Callahan gave me a chance when nobody else would, he explained. He taught me everything I know about ranching. He seems like a good man, Bethany observed. The best, Yates agreed. Lost his wife and daughter to cholera years ago. The ranch hands are the closest thing to family he has now. On the fourth day, Bethany felt strong enough to venture outside. Yates helped her to a bench under a cottonwood tree near the house, where she could feel the sun on her face and watch the activity of the ranch. It's so peaceful here, she murmured, closing her eyes and letting the breeze caress her healing skin. It is, Yates agreed, settling beside her at a respectful distance, though it can get plenty exciting when we're branding or during roundup. Tell me about it, she requested. About your work here. His face lit up as he described the rhythms of ranch life, the pre-dawn mornings, the satisfaction of a job well done, the camaraderie among the hands. As he spoke, Bethany found herself watching his hands, strong, capable hands that she now knew would never strike in anger. Their peaceful moment was shattered by the sound of approaching riders. Bethany tensed, her body remembering pain before her mind could process the potential threat. Stay here, Yates said, standing. His hand moved instinctively to the pistol at his hip. Several men rode into the yard, Victor Thomas at their head. Bethany's breath caught in her throat at the sight of her husband, immaculately dressed as always, his handsome face set in lines of righteous indignation. Only she knew the cruelty that lived behind that facade. That's far enough, Mr. Callahan called from the porch of the main house. Several ranch hands had materialized casually but unmistakably armed. Victor reined his horse to a stop. I've come for my wife, Callahan. The sheriff knows I'm here. Does he know why Mrs. Thomas fled from you? Callahan responded evenly. Victor's expression darkened. My wife is unwell, prone to hysterics and falsehoods. She needs to come home where I can care for her properly. She's not going anywhere with you. Yates stepped forward, his voice hard. Victor's gaze shifted to him, then beyond to where Bethany sat frozen. Ah, there she is, hiding behind her new protector. His voice dripped with insinuation. Tell me, wife, did you warm this cowboy's bed to earn your keep? Always were eager to spread your legs. Yates lunged forward, but Callahan's voice stopped him. That's enough, Thomas. You're not welcome here. The law says a man has a right to his wife, Victor countered. Unless you're planning to defy the law, wouldn't be the first time, Callahan replied mildly. Now I suggest you leave before my boys decide your presence is offensive to the lady." The standoff stretched for a long, tense moment. Then Victor smiled, a cold expression that Bethany knew all too well. "Very well, but this isn't over." He turned his horse. "Enjoy your whore, gentlemen. I'll be back with the law on my side." They watched in silence as the men rode away. Only when they had disappeared from sight did Bethany realize she was trembling uncontrollably. Yates was at her side instantly. "You're safe," he assured her. "He won't get to you here." But they both knew Victor's threat wasn't empty. He had connections, influence. How long before he returned with more men, perhaps even with legal authority to reclaim his property? Callahan joined them, his expression grim. "We need to talk strategy," he said. "Inside, if you're able, Mrs. Thomas." The discussion that followed was both frightening and liberating. For the first time, Bethany found men who believed her without question, who saw her bruises as evidence of Victor's true nature rather than her own failings. "Divorce is difficult but not impossible," Callahan explained. "However, it would require you to appear in court to face him directly." The thought made her stomach clench with fear. "There's another option," Yates said quietly. "We could get her away from the territory altogether, start fresh somewhere Victor can't reach her." "Running isn't a permanent solution," Callahan cautioned. "It is if she runs far enough." Yates leaned forward. "My cousin has a ranch in Wyoming. She'd be safe there." Bethany listened to them discuss her future as if she had choices, as if her life could be something other than subjugation or fear. It was dizzying. "What do you want, Mrs. Thomas?" Callahan asked finally, bringing her back to the conversation. What did she want? No one had asked her that in so long. "I want to be free of him," she said slowly. "I want to never feel afraid again." That night, alone in her small room, Bethany found herself unable to sleep. Victor's face haunted her, not the public face he showed the world, but the contorted mask of rage she had come to fear. Would she ever truly escape him? A soft knock at her door startled her. "Yes," she called hesitantly. "It's Yates," came the quiet response. "I saw your light. Wanted to make sure you were all right." She opened the door to find him standing there, still fully dressed despite the late hour. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Neither could I." He hesitated. "Would you like some company, just to talk?" he added hastily. She nodded, and they moved to the small sitting area of Martha and Robert's cabin. Robert was already snoring in the bedroom, and Martha had gone to help deliver a baby at a neighboring ranch. "I keep thinking about what he said," Bethany confessed once they were seated. "About me being what he called me." Yates's jaw tightened. "You shouldn't give his words any power." "But what if people believe him? What if they think I'm exactly what he described?" "Anyone who knows you would never believe it," Yates said firmly. "No one knows me," she whispered. "Not really." Victor made sure of that. Yates was quiet for a moment. "I'd like to know you," he said finally, his voice soft. "The real you, not the version your husband tried to create." Something warm unfurled in Bethany's chest, a feeling she couldn't immediately identify. "I'm not sure I know who that is anymore. We can find out together," he suggested, "if you want." That night they talked for hours. Bethany told him about her childhood in Missouri, about her dreams of becoming a teacher before her father's death had left her destitute, about the books she loved and the music that moved her. Yates listened, really listened, asking questions that showed he valued her thoughts and experiences. In turn, he shared stories of his own journey west, of the mentor who had taught him to break horses, of the first time he'd seen the mountains and felt like he'd found where he belonged. Dawn was breaking when they finally fell silent, comfortable in each other's company in a way Bethany had never experienced with another person. "You should get some rest," Yates said, rising reluctantly. "Thank you," Bethany said, "for listening, for treating me like I matter." "You do matter," he replied simply. "More than you know." The next week brought both healing and tension. Bethany's bruises began to fade, and her ribs pained her less with each passing day. She started helping Martha with small tasks around the cookhouse, finding satisfaction in work that was appreciated rather than criticized. Yates continued to visit daily, sometimes bringing her wildflowers or an interesting stone he'd found on his rounds. Their conversations deepened. and Bethany found herself looking forward to his visits with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened her. But beneath the growing peace of her new routine lay the constant awareness that Victor was planning his next move. Twice, riders from town brought news that he was gathering support, painting himself as the wronged husband and Bethany as the wayward wife. "We need to make a decision soon," Callahan told her after the second such report. "Thomas is not a man who gives up easily." That evening, as Bethany sat on the porch watching the sunset, Yates joined her with a troubled expression. "What is it?" she asked, immediately concerned. "Word from town," he said grimly. "Thomas has convinced Judge Harlow to issue an order compelling your return. They'll be here by tomorrow noon." Fear, cold and familiar, washed over her. "Then I have to leave tonight." Yates corrected, "we have to leave tonight." At her questioning look, he continued, "I'm not letting you face this alone, Bethany. If you're willing, I'll take you to my cousin's ranch in Wyoming. You'll be safe there while we figure out a more permanent solution." "But your life is here," she protested. "Your work, Mr. Callahan. Mr. Callahan is the one who suggested it," Yates interrupted. "He's giving me leave to escort you and a job recommendation for when we arrive." He took a deep breath. "The truth is, I can't stand the thought of you facing this without support, without me." The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning neither was quite ready to voice. "You would do that for me?" Bethany asked softly. "I would do far more," Yates replied, his eyes never leaving hers. Preparations moved swiftly. Martha packed food and medical supplies while Robert saddled horses Willow for Bethany and a sturdy gelding named Thunder for Yates. Callahan provided money and letters of introduction, along with a small pistol that he pressed into Bethany's reluctant hands. "Just in case," he said. "Though I pray you never need it." By midnight, they were ready. The moon provided enough light to travel by, at least until they could reach the old miners' trail that would take them north through the mountains. "It won't be an easy journey," Yates warned as he helped Bethany mount. 3 weeks, maybe 4, depending on weather and how you're healing." "I'm stronger than I look," she assured him, squaring her shoulders despite the lingering pain in her ribs. Callahan approached for a final farewell. "You're doing the right thing, Mrs. Thomas. No one should have to live in fear." He squeezed her hand. "I've included annulment papers in your packet. When you reach Wyoming, find a judge named Lawrence Mills. He's an old friend who understands situations like yours." "Thank you," Bethany said, tears pricking her eyes, "for everything." With final goodbyes to Martha and Robert, they set off into the night, keeping to the shadows as they rode away from the only safety Bethany had known since fleeing her husband. They traveled through the dark, speaking little, both acutely aware of the risk they were taking. By dawn, they had covered nearly 15 miles and reached the foothills where the miners' trail began. "We'll rest here for a few hours," Yates decided, helping Bethany dismount in a sheltered ravine. "Eat something, then push on before the heat gets too bad." They shared a simple meal of bread, jerky, and dried fruit. Bethany watched Yates as he cared for the horses, his movements efficient and gentle. "Are you certain about this?" she asked suddenly. "Coming with me," he paused, water bucket in hand. "More certain than I've been about anything in a long time." "Why?" Yates set down the bucket and approached, crouching before her. "Because in the short time I've known you, I've seen more courage and dignity than in most people I've met in my entire life." He hesitated, then continued softly. "And because when I think about you leaving without me, it feels like something vital would go missing from my world." The confession hung in the air between them, neither quite ready to name the growing feeling that had taken root during their late-night talks and quiet moments of connection. "I feel it too," Bethany admitted, her voice barely audible. "This pull toward you. But I'm still legally bound to Victor, and I don't know if I'll ever be whole enough to offer anyone what they deserve." "You don't need to be whole," Yates said gently. "None of us are, we just need to be willing to heal." He stood, offering her his hand. "For now, let's focus on getting you to safety. The rest, we have time to figure out." They continued northward, following the trail as it wound through increasingly rugged terrain. Yates set a pace that respected Bethany's injuries while making good time. By nightfall, they had climbed high enough that the air had cooled considerably. "We'll make camp here," Yates decided, gesturing to a level area partially sheltered by rock outcroppings. Should be safe enough. As he built a small fire, Bethany arranged their bedrolls on opposite sides of the flames. The domestic nature of the task struck her suddenly how natural it felt to work alongside this man, to trust in his presence. "Tell me about Wyoming," she requested as they ate their simple dinner. "What's it like?" Yates's face lit up with enthusiasm. "Beautiful, wilder than here. Mountains that make you feel small in the best possible way, forests so thick you can lose yourself in them," he smiled. "My cousin James has a decent spread near the Bighorn Mountains. Good water, good grazing. He's always said there's a place for me there if I wanted it. And did you want it?" He considered this. "Never enough to leave the broken spoke, until now." The simple statement warmed Bethany more than the fire before them. That night, she slept better than she had since fleeing Victor, lulled by the knowledge that Yates was nearby, keeping watch. When nightmares did come, Victor's hands around her throat, his voice promising punishment, she woke to find Yates already at her side, his presence a silent comfort. "You were calling out," he explained softly. "You're safe." She nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. Without thinking, she reached for his hand, needing the anchor of his touch. He gave it freely, his calloused fingers wrapping gently around hers. They stayed that way until she drifted back to sleep, his thumb tracing soothing circles on the back of her hand. The next morning brought clouds and the promise of rain. They broke camp quickly, hoping to make it to an abandoned way station Yates remembered from a previous journey before the weather turned. "How much of a head start do we have?" Bethany asked as they rode, the question that had been haunting her since they left. Yates considered this. If Thomas went to the ranch at noon as planned, Callahan would have stalled him, probably claimed you'd gone into town with Martha. By the time they figured out you weren't coming back, we'd have nearly a full day's lead. "Will he follow?" "He might," Yates acknowledged. "But he doesn't strike me as a man comfortable with hardship. The trail ahead isn't easy." "You don't know how much his pride drives him," Bethany said quietly. "He won't tolerate being defied, especially not publicly." Yates's expression hardened. "Let him come. He'll find I'm not so easily intimidated." The way station appeared as the first raindrops began to fall, a sturdy log structure built to shelter travelers on the old mining route. Inside, they found a stone fireplace, rough bunks built into the walls, and a table with benches. "Not exactly the Grand Hotel, but it'll keep us dry," Yates remarked as he stabled the horses in the lean-to at the back. Bethany set about making the space habitable, sweeping away dust and cobwebs with a makeshift broom of bundled twigs. By the time Yates returned, she had a small fire going in the fireplace. "You're good at that," he observed. "Victor thought servants were an unnecessary expense," she explained. "I learned to manage a household with just my own hands." Yates's jaw tightened at the mention of her husband, but he said nothing, instead helping her prepare their evening meal from the provisions Martha had packed. The rain intensified as night fell, drumming on the roof and intensifying the coziness of their shelter. Bethany found herself relaxing as they shared stories over dinner, the familiar routine they'd established at the ranch continuing here on the trail. "I never thought I could feel this way again," she admitted as they sat by the fire. "What way?" Yates asked, safe, almost happy. She stared into the flames. "Even with everything that's happened, everything that's still uncertain, when I'm with you, I feel like maybe the future isn't something to dread." Yates moved from his seat to kneel before her, his eyes serious. "Bethany, I want you to know something. Whatever happens when we reach Wyoming, whether you decide to stay or go elsewhere, I'll support your choice. Your freedom to decide your own path is what matters most to me." The sincerity in his voice brought tears to her eyes. "No one has ever put my choices first." "Well, I'm putting them first now," he said firmly, "and I always will as long as you want me in your life." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken emotion. Bethany found herself leaning forward slightly, drawn by a force she couldn't name. Yates remained perfectly still, his breathing shallow, giving her the space to decide. Slowly, hesitantly, she raised a hand to his cheek. His skin was warm beneath her palm, rough with stubble. He turned his face slightly, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm that sent shivers racing up her arm. Yates, she whispered, his name a question and an answer all at once. I'm here, he responded, equally soft. I'm right here. Their first kiss was tentative, a brush of lips so gentle it might have been imagined. The second was surer, a confirmation of something that had been building since that first moment in the abandoned cabin. Bethany felt herself melting into him, fear giving way to a warmth that spread through her entire body. When they parted, Yates rested his forehead against hers, his breathing unsteady. I've wanted to do that since the moment I saw you, he confessed, even bruised and terrified, she asked, half joking. Especially then, he said seriously. Your courage took my breath away, she laughed softly. I wasn't courageous, I was desperate. Sometimes they're the same thing, he brushed a strand of hair from her face. Bethany, I know this is fast and your situation is complicated. If you want to forget this happened, she silenced him with another kiss. I don't want to forget. I want to remember what it feels like to be touched with kindness. They spent the night talking and sharing gentle touches, redrawing the boundaries of their relationship with each moment of connection. Yates never pushed, never demanded, content to follow Bethany's lead as she cautiously explored this new territory of tender affection. When dawn broke, they reluctantly prepared to continue their journey, both aware that lingering too long in one place increased the risk of pursuit. The rain had passed, leaving the world washed clean and the trail muddy but passable. As they rode, Bethany found herself stealing glances at Yates, marveling at how dramatically her life had changed in such a short time. 2 weeks ago, she had been trapped in a prison of fear and pain. Now, despite the uncertainties ahead, she felt the first stirrings of hope not just for safety, but for happiness. They made good progress that day and the next, pushing northward through increasingly remote terrain. Yates proved to be an ideal traveling companion, capable, attentive to her needs without being overbearing, and possessed of a quiet humor that often surprised a laugh from her when she least expected it. On the third night, as they camped beneath a massive pine tree, Bethany finally asked the question that had been on her mind. What will happen when we reach Wyoming? Yates looked up from tending the fire. That depends on what you want to happen, and if I want to stay with you. She asked, her heart pounding, his expression softened. Then nothing would make me happier. He moved to sit beside her. Bethany, I know it's too soon to speak of certain things with your marriage still legally binding. But I want you to know that what I feel for you isn't just concern or protectiveness. It's deeper than that. I feel it too, she admitted, and it terrifies me almost as much as it thrills me. He took her hand, his touch now familiar and comforting. We have time. Once we reach James's ranch, we'll contact Judge Mills about the annulment. After that, we can take things as slowly as you need. The promise of patience, of respect for her boundaries, meant more to Bethany than any declaration of love could have in that moment. Their journey continued northward, each day bringing new challenges and discoveries. They crossed swift-flowing streams, navigated treacherous mountain passes, and rode through valleys so beautiful they left Bethany breathless. Throughout it all, Yates remained her constant, his steady presence a foundation she could lean on when her strength faltered. As they traveled, Bethany felt herself changing, growing stronger not just physically but in spirit. The woman who had fled Silveridge in terror was giving way to someone newer, someone who looked to the future with anticipation rather than dread. On the 10th day, they encountered their first significant obstacle, a rockslide that had obliterated the trail ahead. We'll have to go around, Yates said after surveying the damage. Adds a day or two to our journey, but it can't be helped. The detour took them through thicker forest where the trail was often little more than a game path. Progress slowed considerably, and Bethany could sense Yates's growing unease. What's wrong? She asked as they made camp that evening. He hesitated before answering. This area isn't as familiar to me, and being off the main trail makes us more vulnerable if anyone is following. The reminder of potential pursuit sobered their mood. That night, Yates insisted on taking the longer watch, checking and rechecking his pistol before settling at the edge of their camp, eyes scanning the darkness. Bethany woke before dawn to find him still vigilant, his posture tense. You need to rest, she said softly, moving to sit beside him. I will when we're back on the main trail, he promised. She rested her head against his shoulder. You can't protect me if you're exhausted. He conceded the point with a small smile, allowing her to guide him to his bedroll where he quickly fell into a deep sleep. Bethany watched over him, struck by the trust implied in his willingness to rest under her guard. They returned to the main trail late the following day, both relieved to be on more certain ground. The weather held fair, and they made good time over the next several days, pushing northward with renewed determination. On the 15th day of their journey, they crossed the territorial line into Wyoming. The landscape had been gradually changing: broader valleys, denser forests, mountains that seemed to touch the very sky. "It's beautiful," Bethany breathed as they paused at an overlook. The vista spread before them like a painting. "Welcome to Wyoming territory," Yates said, pride evident in his voice. "James's ranch is still about a week's ride, but at least we're in the right territory now." That night, as they made camp in a sheltered grove, a sense of accomplishment settled over them. They had covered hundreds of miles, faced obstacles together, and grown closer with each passing day. The tension of pursuit had eased somewhat now that they had crossed into Wyoming, though neither of them had forgotten the threat that Victor represented. After dinner, Yates pulled something from his saddlebag, a small bottle of whiskey. "I've been saving this for a special occasion," he explained, pouring a small measure into their tin cups. "Crossing into Wyoming seems worth celebrating." They toasted under the stars, the whiskey warming Bethany from the inside out. As they sat together by the fire, she found herself studying Yates's profile, memorizing the lines of his face illuminated by the dancing flames. "I never thought I could feel this way again," she admitted softly. He turned to her, questioning. "Hopeful," she clarified. "Before I met you, I'd forgotten what it felt like to look forward to tomorrow." Yates set aside his cup and took her hand. "Bethany," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "these past weeks have been the most meaningful of my life. I know your situation is still complicated, but I need you to know that what I feel for you is real and lasting." "I know," she whispered. "I feel it too." He leaned forward, cupping her face with tender hands. "When we reach James's place, when you're truly safe, I want to court you properly. If you'll allow it." The formal request, so old-fashioned and honorable, brought tears to her eyes. "I would like that very much." Their kiss was different this time, deeper, filled with promise and the growing certainty that what they had found together was rare and precious. Later, as they lay in their separate bedrolls, Bethany reflected on how completely her life had transformed. From a prison of fear to this open sky filled with possibilities, all because one man had found her hiding and promised her safety. The next morning dawned crisp and clear. They packed up camp efficiently, the routine now familiar, and continued their journey northward. Yates estimated they would reach his cousin's ranch in 5 or 6 days if the weather held and no further obstacles arose. Around midday, as they rode through a narrow pass, Yates suddenly raised his hand in a signal to stop. Bethany reined in Willow, instantly alert to the tension in his posture. "What is it?" she whispered. He pointed silently to the ground. Fresh hoofprints marked the trail, at least 3 horses, heading in the same direction they were traveling. "Could be anyone," Bethany suggested, though her heart had begun to race. "Other travelers." Yates dismounted to examine the tracks more closely. "These aren't more than a few hours old." He looked up at her, his expression grim. "And one of the horses is shod with an unusual pattern I recognize. It's Blackwood's livery mark." "Silverage," Bethany whispered, fear clutching at her throat. Victor had hired men from their hometown to track them. "We need to move," Yates decided, swinging back into his saddle. "They're ahead of us, which means they've either passed us while we were on that detour, or they know where we're heading," Bethany finished the thought. They rode harder that day than they had since the beginning of their journey, pushing the horses as much as they dared on the rough terrain. By nightfall, both animals were lathered and tired, forcing them to make camp despite their unease. "We'll set out at first light," Yates said as he unsaddled Thunder. "Cut across country instead of following the main trail. It's riskier, but it might let us avoid them." That night, sleep proved elusive for both of them. Bethany felt the familiar tendrils of fear creeping back, threatening to strangle the newfound hope she had been nurturing. Beside her, Yates remained vigilant, his hand never far from his weapon. "What if he finds us?" she asked in the darkness. "What if all of this was for nothing?" Yates moved closer, wrapping a protective arm around her shoulders. "It wasn't for nothing. No matter what happens, you've already proven you won't be victimized again. You chose freedom, Bethany, that can never be taken from you." His words steadied her, reminding her of how far she had come. She was no longer the frightened woman hiding in an abandoned cabin, hoping to avoid the next beating. She had survived, had found courage she didn't know she possessed. At dawn, they set out again, leaving the established trail to cut across open country. The going was slower, the terrain more challenging, but Yates's knowledge of the area proved invaluable as he navigated by landmark and sun position. By midday, they had reached a high ridge overlooking a broad valley. In the distance, a plume of smoke rose from what appeared to be a camp. "That's them," Yates said grimly, handing Bethany his spyglass. Through the lens, she could make out 3 men gathered around a fire. Her breath caught as she recognized one of them, Silas Jenkins, Victor's foreman and loyal enforcer. "They're waiting for us," she whispered, handing back the spyglass with trembling fingers. "No," Yates corrected after studying the camp further. "They're not just waiting, they're blocking the most direct route to James's ranch." His expression darkened. "They know exactly where we're headed." "How? Someone at the broken spoke must have talked." He tucked the spyglass away. "Doesn't matter now, we need a new plan." They retreated from the ridge to discuss their options. The most direct route to James's ranch was now too dangerous, but circling wide would add days to their journey, days they couldn't afford with their supplies running low. "There's a small settlement about 20 miles east of here," Yates finally said. "Little more than a trading post and a few cabins, but we could resupply there, maybe get word to James about our situation." "Will it be safe?" "Safer than trying to slip past those men." He squeezed her hand reassuringly. "We'll get through this, Bethany, I promise." They altered course, heading east across increasingly rugged terrain. The day grew hot, the sun beating down mercilessly as they picked their way through rocky outcroppings and sparse vegetation. By mid-afternoon, both horses were showing signs of fatigue, forcing them to dismount and lead the animals for stretches. As the sun began its descent, they found themselves in a narrow canyon with steep walls that provided welcome shade but also limited their visibility, a tactical disadvantage that made Yates increasingly uneasy. "We should find a place to camp soon," he said, scanning the canyon walls. "Somewhere defensible, if possible." They had just rounded a bend when the sound of hoofbeats echoed off the canyon walls, riders approaching fast from behind them. Bethany's heart lurched with fear as Yates pulled her behind an outcropping of rock. "Mount up," he whispered urgently. "When I give the signal, ride as hard as you can. Don't look back no matter what you hear." "I won't leave you," she protested. "You have to." His eyes were intense as they held hers. "Bethany, listen to me. If anything happens to me, keep heading east. The trading post is called Hawk's Landing. Ask for a man named Donovan, no relation to me, just coincidence. Tell him Yates sent you and you need help getting to James's place. He'll help you." "Yates, promise me," he insisted, the hoofbeats growing louder. "I promise," she whispered, her voice breaking. He kissed her then, hard, desperate, a kiss that felt like both a promise and a goodbye. "Now go," he said, helping her into the saddle. Bethany urged Willow forward, the mare responding gamely despite her fatigue. Behind her, she heard Yates's voice raised in challenge, followed by the sharp crack of gunfire. Every instinct screamed for her to turn back, but she had promised, and so she pressed on, tears streaming down her face as the sounds of conflict faded behind her. The canyon eventually opened into a broader valley, and still she rode, pushing Willow as much as she dared. Night was falling when the mare finally stumbled, forcing Bethany to halt. She dismounted, legs trembling beneath her, and led the exhausted horse to a small stream. As Willow drank, Bethany struggled against despair. Was Yates dead, captured? Should she continue to Hawk's Landing as he had instructed or try to circle back to help him? The decision was made for her when a rider appeared on the ridge above a silhouette against the darkening sky that sent fresh fear coursing through her. She scrambled to Mount Willow, but the mare was too spent to manage more than a trot. Bethany. The voice that called her name wasn't one she feared, but one that had become precious to her. Yates, she called back, hardly daring to hope. The rider urged his horse down the slope, and as he drew nearer, Bethany's knees nearly gave way with relief. It was indeed Yates, though he rode slumped in the saddle, one arm pressed tight against his side. She ran to meet him as he dismounted, catching him when he swayed on his feet. "You're hurt," she said, seeing the dark stains spreading on his shirt. "It's not bad," he assured her, though his pallor said otherwise. "Bullet grazed my side. The others were Jenkins and 2 hired guns. They won't be following us anymore." Did you?" "I didn't have a choice," he said simply. "It was them or us." Bethany helped him to the stream, where she carefully cleaned and bandaged his wound using supplies from their packs. The bullet had indeed only grazed him, but the wound was deep enough to be concerning, especially given their circumstances. "We need to reach Hawk's Landing," Yates said once she had finished. "I've lost too much blood to be much use if we run into more trouble." They made camp there by the stream, both too exhausted to continue. Bethany insisted on taking the watch, allowing Yates to rest and recover some strength. As she sat guard, pistol ready across her lap, she reflected on how much she had changed in such a short time. The woman who had fled Silveridge would never have imagined herself here, tending a gunshot wound and standing guard while the man she was coming to love slept beside her. Morning revealed that Yates's condition had worsened during the night. Fever had set in, making his skin hot to the touch and his eyes unnaturally bright. "We need to get you to help," Bethany said, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. "Hawk's Landing," he murmured. Half a day's ride, maybe less. Getting him into the saddle proved challenging, but once mounted, he managed to stay upright, though pain etched lines in his face. Bethany led both horses, setting a pace that balanced the need for speed with consideration for Yates's condition. By mid-afternoon, buildings appeared on the horizon, the trading post of Hawk's Landing. As they approached, Bethany could make out a cluster of log structures surrounding a larger building with a wide porch. Several horses were hitched outside, and smoke rose from multiple chimneys. Their arrival caused an immediate stir. Men emerged from the trading post, hands hovering near weapons until they saw Yates slumped in his saddle. "This man needs help," Bethany called. "He's been shot." 2 men hurried forward to help Yates dismount, half carrying him toward one of the smaller buildings. A third man, older with a silver-streaked beard, approached Bethany. "I'm looking for a man named Donovan," she said, remembering Yates's instructions. The man nodded. "That'd be me." "And who might you be?" "Bethany Thomas. Yates sent me, that is. He told me to ask for you if we got separated." Recognition dawned in Donovan's weathered face. "You're James's cousin's girl, then. We got word you might be coming this way." He glanced toward the building where they'd taken Yates. Though the message didn't mention trouble. "There are men after us," Bethany explained, her voice lowering. "My husband—" "Say no more," Donovan interrupted. "We know the story. Callahan sent a rider ahead of you, fastest horse in the territory, took a different route. Said you needed help and discretion." The knowledge that Callahan had sent aid ahead of them was overwhelming in its kindness. Tears of relief pricked at Bethany's eyes. "Come on," Donovan said gently. "Let's get you inside and then we'll see to your man." The next hours passed in a blur as Bethany was given food, clean clothes, and a place to wash away the dust of the trail. The trading post doubled as a way station for travelers, with several small rooms available for overnight stays. As soon as she was presentable, she hurried to find Yates. He had been settled in one of these rooms, his wound properly cleaned and bandaged by a woman named Clara who had experience with such injuries. "He'll be fine," Clara assured Bethany. "The wound itself isn't serious, but he lost blood and the infection is what's causing the fever. A few days' rest and my herbal remedies will set him right." Bethany sat beside his bed, holding his hand as he drifted in and out of consciousness. When he was lucid, his first concern was always for her safety. "Donovan," he asked weakly during one such moment. "He's here," Bethany confirmed. "He says Callahan sent word ahead of us." Yates smiled faintly. Good old Callahan, always thinking ahead. Rest now, she urged, smoothing his hair from his forehead. We're safe here. For 3 days, Bethany rarely left Yates's side, tending to him as his fever broke and his strength slowly returned. When she did venture out, it was only to confer with Donovan about their situation. No sign of pursuit, the older man assured her on the 4th day. If there were others besides the ones Yates dealt with, they've lost your trail. What about getting to James's ranch? She asked. I've sent word. He'll be here in 2 days to escort you himself. Donovan regarded her thoughtfully. You've been through quite an ordeal, young lady. We both have, she acknowledged. But I don't regret any of it. Freedom is worth the struggle. By the 6th day at Hawk's Landing, Yates was well enough to sit on the trading post's porch, soaking in the sunshine while Bethany sat beside him, their hands intertwined. The simple pleasure of being together without fear hanging over them felt like a luxury neither had dared hope for during the darkest moments of their journey. I've been thinking, Yates said, his thumb tracing gentle patterns on the back of her hand. About what? About the future. Our future, if you want there to be one. Bethany turned to face him fully. I do want that more than anything. His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. When we reach James's place, I want to build us a home, nothing grand, but something that's ours. A place where you'll never have to be afraid again. The image he painted, a home filled with love rather than fear, brought tears to her eyes. I would like that very much. A rider appeared in the distance, approaching at a steady pace. Bethany felt Yates tense beside her, his hand instinctively moving toward his gun despite his weakened condition. It's all right, Donovan called from inside the trading post. That'll be James. The rider drew closer, revealing a man who bore a striking resemblance to Yates, the same dark hair and strong build, though perhaps a few years older. Cousin, James called as he dismounted, striding forward with a broad smile. Heard you got yourself into a bit of trouble. Nothing I couldn't handle, Yates replied with a grin, rising to clasp his cousin's hand. James turned his attention to Bethany, his expression warming. And you must be the lady worth getting shot for. James Donovan, at your service, madam. Bethany Thomas, she replied, accepting his offered hand. Thank you for coming to meet us. Wouldn't have it any other way. He glanced between them, noting their clasped hands and the way they leaned toward each other. I see my cousin has finally found something more important than horses and cattle. Yates's hand tightened around Bethany's. I have at that. The journey to James's ranch took 2 more days, traveling at a pace that accommodated Yates's healing wound. Bethany found herself warming to James quickly, his good humor and obvious affection for his cousin, making her feel welcome in this new place. The Donovan Ranch proved to be everything Yates had described, a sprawling property nestled against the foothills of the Bighorn Mountains, with lush grazing land and a creek running through it. The main house was larger than Bethany had expected, built of sturdy logs with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. My wife's touch, James explained as he showed them inside to a comfortably furnished great room. Sarah has a way of making a place feel like home. As if summoned by her name, a petite woman with auburn hair appeared, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. You must be Bethany, she said warmly. And Yates, you look like you've been through the wars, cousin. Nothing that won't heal, Yates assured her. Sarah's gaze took in Bethany's still fading bruises with quiet understanding. You both need rest and good food. We've prepared the east cabin for you, Bethany. Yates can take the room off the bunkhouse. Proper accommodations that respected propriety while acknowledging the bond between them, another kindness that touched Bethany deeply. Over the following weeks, Bethany settled into life at the Donovan Ranch. Sarah proved to be a friend as well as a hostess, never pressing for details about Bethany's past, but offering understanding and support nonetheless. The ranch hands treated her with respect, following their employer's lead. Yates recovered fully from his wound, soon joining his cousin in the daily work of the ranch. Bethany found herself drawn to the rhythm of ranch life, helping Sarah with household tasks, learning to garden in the rich Wyoming soil, even trying her hand at riding beyond the simple transportation of their journey. And through it all, her relationship with Yates deepened. True to his word, he courted her properly, bringing wildflowers, taking her on gentle rides to show her the beauty of their new home, sharing stories and dreams by the firelight in the evenings. A month after their arrival, a letter came from Judge Mills, the friend Callahan had mentioned. He would be traveling through the area in 2 weeks' time and would be willing to hear Bethany's case for annulment. "Are you ready for this?" Yates asked her that evening as they walked along the creek, the setting sun painting the mountains gold and pink. "I am," she said with certainty. "I want to be free of Victor in every way, legally as well as physically." He stopped, turning to face her. "And after, what do you want then, Bethany?" She knew what he was asking. In the weeks they had spent at the ranch, they had spoken of many things, but always with the understanding that her marriage still legally bound her, placing limits on what they could plan or promise. "After, I want to begin again," she said softly. "With you, if that's still what you want." Yates's smile was slow and brilliant. "It's all I want." He took her hands in his. "I love you, Bethany. I think I've loved you since I found you hiding in that cabin, so brave and determined despite your fear." "I love you too," she whispered, the words feeling both momentous and natural. "You showed me what love should be: supportive, kind, patient. You gave me back my freedom and my hope." Their kiss was tender, a promise of the future they would build together once the last ties to her past were severed. Judge Mills arrived exactly when promised, a dignified man with kind eyes who listened carefully to Bethany's account of her marriage to Victor Thomas. The evidence of abuse, combined with Victor's abandonment of the search, as confirmed by letters from Callahan, was sufficient grounds for the annulment to be granted. "You are legally free of that union, Miss Bethany," the judge told her, using her maiden name for the first time in years. "May your future bring you the happiness you deserve." That evening, as the sun set on her first day of true freedom, Yates took Bethany to a ridge overlooking the valley. In the distance, a small cabin was under construction, the home he had promised her. "It won't be ready for a few weeks yet," he said, a touch of nervousness in his voice. "But I wanted you to see it, to know that I meant what I said about building a future together." Bethany turned to him, her heart so full she could barely speak. "It's perfect." Yates took her hands, his expression serious. "Bethany, I know you've only just gained your freedom, and I would understand completely if you wanted to enjoy that independence for a time, but I can't imagine my life without you in it." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not now, not until you're ready, but someday." Tears of joy sprang to her eyes. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, Yates Donovan, I will marry you, and I don't need to wait to know that it's what I want more than anything." Their wedding took place the following spring, a simple ceremony attended by James and Sarah, the ranch hands, and a few neighbors who had become friends. Callahan made the long journey from Arizona to stand with Yates, bringing with him news that Victor Thomas had left Silveridge under a cloud of scandal. His business interests collapsed. "Seems once you were gone, other women found the courage to speak about how he'd mistreated them too," Callahan told Bethany. "He won't be hurting anyone else anytime soon." The knowledge brought closure rather than satisfaction. Bethany had moved beyond needing vengeance, focused instead on the future she was building. That future unfolded with a richness she could never have imagined during her darkest days. The cabin Yates built for them became a true home, filled with love and eventually the laughter of children. 2 sons and a daughter completed their family, children who grew up knowing only gentleness from their father, who watched him treat their mother with unwavering respect and adoration. Bethany herself blossomed in her freedom, discovering talents and passions she had never been allowed to explore. She started a small school for the children of ranch workers, finding fulfillment in the teaching career she had once dreamed of. Her experiences gave her a particular compassion for those who had suffered, and more than once over the years, she opened her home to women fleeing situations similar to the one she had escaped. On their 20th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their home watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson, Yates took her hand, the same gentle touch that had first given her hope. "Do you ever think about that day?" he asked. "When I found you in that cabin?" "Often," she admitted. It was the day my life began again. He smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening lines earned from years of laughter and outdoor work. You saved yourself, you know, I just happened to be there to help. Bethany leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid strength that had never been used to hurt, only to protect and support. We saved each other, she corrected softly, and every day since, we've built something beautiful together. As the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, Bethany Thomas Donovan reflected on the journey that had brought her here from a woman fleeing in terror to one surrounded by love, secure in her worth and her place in the world. The path had not been easy, but standing at its end, she knew every step had been worth taking. In the distance, their youngest son called from the barn and Yates rose, offering his hand to help her up. Together, they walked toward the sound of their child's voice, two people who had found in each other not just love, but the courage to believe in second chances and the possibility of happiness after pain.